EM Weekly starting right now, bringing emergency managers from around the world together to learn, share and collaborate.
Welcome. Good morning and good afternoon, wherever you're at. And today is definitely going to be a great conversation because I have a guest back here that you guys all know, Kelly McKinney. Kelly, welcome to EM Weekly.
Thank you, sir. It's great to see you.
Great to see you too. So Kelly, I have, if you noticed, I don't have my little earbuds in today. I have cans on, and that's the reason why I can't wear the Kansas City hat today because I have cans on.
So that's the reason. That's the reason. After our bet that we had a bet on the Bills Chiefs game, and it seems like I don't know. Seems like we talked about how if the Bills won, I would wear a Bills hat on the show. And I would say, Todd is a god. That was the deal.
Yeah.
But then the other side of it was, what was the other side, Todd?
So I will wear the Kansas City Chiefs hat proudly, and I will say, Kelly, and point to the hat here. Visualize this, right? I have to do some visualization today, and say Kelly is God, and then Kansas City beat my Buffalo Bills. And I cried a little tear went down my eye for a half a second, and I wiped it. And I realized it was just the wind blowing in my face.
Yeah, I think you should just say Mahomes is a god and leave it.
True. Mahomes, he's amazing. And speaking of that, at least we have something to talk about other than like disasters and COVID and stuff. So I think
right.
I think Super Bowl and the stuff is a good break for all the strife that we've had coming over the last few months, last year, and summer violence, and then of course the 6th of January and all that kind of stuff. So I think a little bit break from the carnage.
Completely agree. We need football. We need all the, we need to get back to all those the diversions, right? That sort of added to the quality of life. It's been a tough year, and in fact, we were talking in my department yesterday. 27th of January was 1 year since we activated for what was then called 2019 novel coronavirus. So it's been a long year, man, really long.
It has been a long year. It seems like it's not ending. The president came out the other day talking about how there's no short end in sight. And I know a lot of people really felt that once the Biden administration took hold that, all the answers of the world are going to happen and coronavirus is going to be cured. But obviously that's not the case. And we have to really think, about this, right? Like what the plan of attack is. Now the cool thing is we do have the shot, right? And then people are getting their shots. Although, it's slow roll. We got some issues with that. And then, we got FEMA changing hands over here, and we got that. So we got a lot to talk about today, Kelly. So let's start with FEMA first, since it looks like, rightfully so, looks like the president's tapping FEMA to run this rollout with the vaccines. Using things that we've talked about and planned for amazingly that we planned for pods, and now we're going to be able to use them, and it seems like they're getting it played out. And let's kind of go with that. Let's talk about FEMA first. So or you've dealt or met and had some interactions with the new director or the administrator of FEMA. Tell me a little bit about her and what you know and how she's going to change some directions over there.
Well, Deanne Criswell, I don't know her well. I know her by reputation, and I know, I was 8 years at that agency, and so it seems like that we communicate through others. I always say, we got to go have coffee and that kind of thing. So I don't know her well, but I do know what she's done there, and I know, her the opinion that her agency and that staff have developed about her and her capabilities. And I'm super excited about this, and I think she's the right person in the right place at the right time. I think she's certainly qualified. She spent the last 2 years in the in the purifying fires of New York City government. There's no better place to learn disasters than here. And I think so. I think she was a week in the job when there was a 6 network crash of the Con Edison power grid in Manhattan on a Saturday night about 7 o'clock. And I don't even know she might have been 2 days in the job. And she just, she stepped right in. She led the press conference. I think the mayor was somewhere else. So she's been in the middle of the job since day one, and then obviously the last year leading the coronavirus effort. So, Todd, you and I have had this conversation a number of times. I wrote a book. I wrote a book because I spent so much time in New York City government, at OEM. I think it's, one of the best, local emergency management agencies anywhere. And there's a number of reasons for that. I mean, it's well-resourced because of the history of disasters in New York. But anyway, I just think that, she comes from FEMA. She was an FCO at FEMA. She was an officer in the U.S. Air Force for many years, and in a first responder position. She is, and then she spent this 2 year, sort of almost boot camp, learning the fundamentals of the local side of the business, right? So I think she's perfectly placed, and it's a tough job to step into for sure.
Yeah, it is. It's funny. I've spoken to a few of the former FEMA administrators, and they've been on the show, and all of them are like, it is a grind to be in that position. Politically speaking, the off tempo, it's definitely not for the faint of heart to step into that role, And so, and like everything else, we want to make sure that our FEMA administrators are successful in what they do, and I really do hope she comes up and does a great job. Now, obviously, historically speaking, the first female to run FEMA, I think that's kind of exciting. And one of the things that we talk about here a lot is really getting more diverse opinions into emergency management, and I think this might do a lot for that as well. What do you think about that?
I think just to say a sexist statement, I think women are better emergency managers because they're more instinctive collaborators, and emergency management is about collaboration. And you get a lot of men that want to come in, and they're focused on the command and control elements. They're always asking who's in charge, and am I in charge, or who's in charge? And and I think a lot of times a good emergency manager is coming into the job saying, what are the problems and how can we solve them? I don't care who gets credit for it. We have to fix this. And I think I think she's a fixer. I think women are, again, I think they're more skilled, more natural at coordination, which is the mission of emergency management. So I think that's, and but it's tough when you talk about FEMA. FEMA is a beast. It's a monster. And the reason it's a Frankenstein's monster has been crafted by Congress over many years. It's got so many bosses, and they all have assigned it this laundry list of responsibilities. I kicked around that list the other day, Todd. It actually came out of there was a great interview with the outgoing FEMA administrator, Pete Gaynor, who I have a lot of admiration for him. He did a great job, under the circumstances he was in. He had a tough boss, when you not the DHS boss, but the ultimate, boss was a very difficult boss to be an emergency manager for, a very difficult boss to coordinate for, because he just didn't play the rules of the game like you need your boss to do, right? I mean, you need your boss to be the lead communicator and the risk communicator, and you need your boss to be understanding the need to bring together the nation, not only in the response, but at least to understand and have a shared understanding of, what is this beast that we're facing that's called coronavirus. And let's all come together as a nation, and because the sum is greater than than the individual parts. And so if you bring them together, and great leaders do that, presidents have done that, governors do that, mayors do that, but this boss, President Trump, he had a different view of how that was done. So it was a very tough thing to figure out. But as he was leaving, he did an exit interview with Eric Holderman, Disaster Zone. Eric has a column called Disaster Zone. I've read Eric for a long time. He's also comes from the local emergency management side, and so he did this interview, and Pete talked about, you're a little more honest in your exit interview, right? You don't have to worry too much about it. So he talked about what FEMA does. He talked about that list of all of the things that FEMA does, and it's just enormous. What they have to do on a daily basis is enormous. They run the largest flood insurance program in the world, yep. Right? They are actively managing 600 plus declared federal disasters right now today. 600. Can you imagine that, right? And so, and that's just the start. They run ready.gov. They're responsible for continuity of government across the federal system, and on and on and on. So how do they have time, to run response, to run a job? And that's really, I think, the challenge that she has. And if you look at FEMA, you and I, Todd, we're I don't know if we're fans. I don't know what we are with FEMA, but we spend a lot of time watching it. We're FEMA watchers. And they've come under a lot of criticism in their overseers, GAO and these congressional committees, and they're all talking about, you're understaffed and you need to staff up. You need to get more expertise in there. You need to expand your personnel capabilities. And I think that's really, if I was the boss, I think, because Commissioner Criswell is not there yet. I think she has to be confirmed. That would be one of my main thoughts is, how am I going to get some talent in there, and build that big team as big as I can build it, as big as they'll let me build it, to share some of the burden of this work. Mm-hmm. There's so much to do. And that's all on top of a nationwide pandemic response.
Absolutely. Brock Long talks about one of the issues with FEMA is that, and you can see this with the new administrator coming in, is that there's a gap in between when somebody joins FEMA as like a entry level emergency manager, works their way up, and they get to a point to where they're at the ceiling, and they have to leave the organization. And maybe it's not a bad thing, right? Maybe it's not a bad thing for them to leave the organization, go work in local government for a little while, and they come back, or they go work in the private sector for a while and come back. But there's like the gap between that ceiling and going up to the next level.
Yeah.
And other organizations don't do that, right? If we take a look at the first response organizations, and Eileen makes a point too. She says a lot of original emergency managers come from first responder agencies, and you're right. And outside just the alpha male orientation of it's also the idea though is that they're used to the ladder that they can climb. You start off as a firefighter, entry level firefighter, and at the end of your career, you're the commissioner or you're the chief, right? And FEMA doesn't have the ability to do that, and we don't see that a lot in general in emergency management jobs throughout the United States, right? There's some larger agencies, but it seems to be that there is that ceiling of leadership that's placed upon emergency managers. And I think that's one of the things that we as an organization, we as a profession need to crack and to be able to step up. Because, you see on the news, right? You take a look at, whatever alphabet news that you watch, and you see them bringing in like Bratton or other big name police chiefs, right? You see them bringing in, sheriffs from across the country. You see them bringing in those type of people, but you never really see them bringing in former emergency managers to talk about disaster response during disasters, and I don't think it's even on their radar. And that's one of the things that we have to do better as a profession to really get ourselves out there as that subject matter expert to be brought in to talk about problems that are happening.
I think that's so right. And, there was just an appointment in Iowa, and I should have this stuff. I should do my homework and have these names in front of me. But there was a gentleman that was just appointed by the governor of Iowa to head the Iowa Department of Homeland Security and Emergency Management. I don't remember the gentleman's name, but he was a counselor to the governor, and he was a commissioner of a couple of other agencies. So he wasn't a career emergency manager. He was somebody that had come in and worked on behalf of the governor during the coronavirus crisis and some other things. And so he was an insider, a government fixer essentially, and appointed into that job. And that's not that unusual, right? That these governors appoint people who are just fixers into that job. And I think that isn't necessarily a bad thing. It doesn't mean, it's just like when a first responder becomes the boss. There's plenty of former fire chiefs and police chiefs that are unbelievably effective emergency managers. But it's not necessarily so, right? I mean, do you have all of the skills and do you have the understanding it takes to run all the aspects of the agency, right? And so, but you're right, Todd. We're our own worst enemy. We are abysmally bad when it comes to communicating, our value proposition to those governors. I mean, those governors should be saying, they should have in their heads a list of 2 or 3 or even more, seasoned emergency managers that could fill that spot.
Absolutely. Yeah, let's take a quick break. And when we come back, I want to talk about what emergency managers can do going forward with COVID. The Outer Limits Supply Company was founded on the idea of providing high-quality first aid kits. Their goal is to supply the life-saving equipment you'll need to mitigate the majority of injuries often seen during austere times. From minor injury on an outdoor adventure with your family to your team responding to a major traumatic event, Outer Limits Supply has the kits to manage most situations, providing practical, user-friendly first aid kits that anyone can use. Enter EM Weekly, all capitals, at checkout and save 20% off your total purchase. Go to www.outerlimitsupply.com today. That's outerlimitsupply.com. Now, Kelly, I don't know about you, but I'm a gear guy. I just have tactical nylon one on my ears. My wife so much that she wants me to get rid of some of the stuff. But I have to get the perfect bag, and I found it. It's a VanQuest bag, and my VanQuest bag I carry it every day. I love it. On the inside of it it's bright orange, so I can find stuff with my bad eyes. In the middle of the night. I don't know if you guys have ever been deployed and you're trying to look for stuff, and you're going through it, and you have your flashlight, and you can never find stuff in a timely manner. But VanQuest has solved that by putting a liner inside of it that's bright orange, so you can find the stuff that you're looking for. So if you want a VanQuest bag, check them out. Go to vanquest.com, and for checkout, you can have VanQuest, but EM Weekly, EM5 Weekly, I'm sorry, all capital, and you will get a 10% discount on your total order from vanquest.com. So Kelly, tell me about COVID response and why should emergency managers be involved? I'll tell you a quick story. I'm not going to leave any names. Leave the innocent safe, right? So I have a friend of mine, emergency manager at a state university, and he back 6 months ago was talking about, hey, we should really start talking about planning for pods. We're going to have to be using them here shortly. They kept pushing off. The health department kept pushing off, and all of a sudden, mid-December, just before the holidays, everybody's scrambling because they're like, hey, we're going to start doing a pod. Let's pull it out. We've been exercising them for a long time. We've used them for flu vaccines and whatnot. Why are we struggling with this? This does not make sense to me. I'm not pointing fingers at anybody. I'm not in the field, so I can't say what you guys are doing wrong or necessarily. But I'm saying it just doesn't make sense on the surface of why we're struggling with putting a friggin' pot up when we practiced it all this time.
It's just, it's mind blowing. And, I was, I spent 10 weeks in the New York City Emergency Operations Center after 9/11. And, we were there about 3 weeks. And all of a sudden, somebody dropped, 5 envelopes full of a granular form of anthrax into a mailbox in Princeton, New Jersey. And we had the anthrax attacks, right? And, they sent them to the New York Post and NBC News and the National Enquirer. And, that was a wake up call. So, since that time in New York, and I know everywhere, there's been an extraordinary amount of time and effort placed into how you distribute, whether it be antibiotics or vaccines, to mass prophylax the population in a matter of hours and days. And I just have to get this out, Todd, because I don't know how many hours I spent in pod meetings, but because we didn't use it, somebody has to give me those hours of my life back. I need them back. I mean, like, who can give those? Because if you use them, then you can say, okay, it was all worth it. But I've been asked that question a dozen times, 20 times over the past 6 months. What happened to all those pod plans? And in New York, and a lot of folks in New York City Department of Health and Mental Hygiene, they have a program, very well developed program. It was run by a gentleman named David Starr. A lot of folks know Dave. And that program, it ran massive exercises. It has very well developed plans. And and why none of that was used is sort of a mystery. The only thing I can say, and I don't want to speak for New York because I don't know the story in New York. I don't know what happened, but I think it could be in a lot of jurisdictions that people waited. They had the plans and they had the teams, and maybe they got a little stale. Maybe they hadn't met in a while, and they were waiting to see what was going to happen. And then, so by the time that there was a need, maybe events overtook them, and these local elected officials said, no, we're going to go in this direction because I want to do this quick. So but I don't know. I mean, I think if you had that plan and you had the pods and you had turned all of that on before it was needed, maybe some of it would have been used by now. But it's
No, but that's the thing that drives me crazy is that as emergency managers, we should be leaning forward on everything, right? We should be ahead of that 8 ball, leaning forward, and having the decision makers to be able to say, no, let's pull back or whatever, but having that stuff ready to go, right? At what time in any training that you've ever done, or any exercises or any actual events that we've ever done, have we not leaned forward? And I mean, I know we've had some disasters where FEMA wasn't leaning forward, but that's because they weren't allowed to. That's a whole different story, right? But now they do, right? Even with Maria, they were leaning forward. They had stuff over there already before the storm hit in Puerto Rico. So leaning forward is something that we do. And it seems like with these pods, I don't know what happened where the communication broke that came down. No one was, I shouldn't say nobody, because I don't know about every single jurisdiction, but very few prominent jurisdictions were leaning forward on this. And I think that's part of the reason why we're having such a problem with the vaccine rollout. I don't know. This is just my opinion. If you guys differ on that, please tell me in the comments that you're differing on that. But what do you think, Kelly? Am I off on this? Am I wrong?
That's my take on it. It really is. And I'm kind of I'm unfortunately I'm in this sort of back and forth on LinkedIn on one of my posts. Yesterday I posted 1 year ago we activated, and there's some experts there, some industry experts, some medical intelligence experts, and they're all like, what was your trigger? And I said, we didn't have a trigger. We were just, uninformed emergency managers that heard that there was a new virus of which there was no known human immunity. And we said to ourselves, why would that not come and overtake, New York State and New York City? Somebody tell me why not. And they're like, well, you guys, we were warning you, we were telling you, and this is a classic case. And I've when I talk to people about this, in public speaking, I go back to Taleb, right, with the black swan. And what Taleb says is, after big disasters, people rewrite history. They talk about all these things that they talk about how, they what do you call it? They have 20/20 hindsight. They talk about, oh, we were ready. We knew it was coming. We sounded the alarm. And I'll tell you right now, when we activated 1 year ago, these experts were not sounding the alarm. They were not. They were all talking this job away. They were talking about all the differences in China and how those people were heavy smokers and how, how it wasn't coming. And an emergency manager, if I have an expert that's writing papers or declaring that this thing is coming, my life is easy because I get people in a room and I say, look, this is what the experts say. This thing is going to hit us. And they weren't there. And these experts were all, and they were all talking the job away. And now, but again, everybody now they're all pinging me now. They're like, oh no, we warned you. We told you. And I'll tell you something, that's crap. And that's the reason, by the way, emergency managers, axiom number one, never trust the experts, right? Never trust them. I mean, we make those judgment calls. We assess and we activate based on that risk. And, I'm not an epidemiologist, but if someone tells me there's a virus that has no immunity that's spreading like wildfire through central China, I'm going to activate for that. And so I do think that because there was so much confusion and so much talking, a lot of emergency managers waited, and maybe they waited too long, and maybe they didn't have all of the working groups in place. And then when it was too late, and they started to turn it all on, things just things were moving too fast at that point, and maybe they got overtaken. I don't know. I mean, I wasn't in the room for that, and I don't have any personal knowledge of that. But you mentioned that, Todd. Maybe we did it. Maybe we weren't proactive enough, and that's kind of my sense.
Excuse me. Absolutely. And leaning forward, like I was saying before, go back to that for a second. I'd have to say I disagree with you a little bit, Kelly, on the fact that I think people were sounding the alarm in the sense that something may come, maybe not knowing what this coronavirus necessarily was, because we do have we call it pandemic flu, right? That was our big scare. We always fighting like the last battle. So, we're looking at 1918. We're fighting that battle still, right? And so we have the pandemic flu plans. The colleges and universities have communicable disease plans specifically for most likely going to be like measles, mumps, rubella issues or something like that have gone through. So we have talked about that. And again, though, this is where I want to say where we made the mistake. We have these plans in place, right? We understand them, but we are afraid to pull the trigger on them. Maybe because there wasn't something enough for somebody to go into the room, an emergency manager to walk into the room with the experts saying, "Hey, Mr. Mayor, Mrs. Mayor, right. This is what we need to do. Here's the reason why, and we need to execute this plan." And we were kind of. I'm sorry. I just something popped up and it just distracted me from my conversation here. But Eileen says, "Did universities and colleges EMs react faster?" They may have, because that's going back to that. Let's going back to the whole plan. Walking into the president of the university or the college and saying, "Hey, we're seeing this happen over here, and we need to react to it." And I will tell one story. This is a personal story, so I'm free to share this. So I was actually working for a college. I was talking to the administration, not necessarily about pandemic flu, but just about leaning forward and having professors putting all of their classes online, even if they weren't going to teach online. And I got so much pushback from the VP of instruction saying how, oh, there's union issues that are going on here. Professors don't want to teach online. They don't want to put their stuff on there. They're afraid of technology, whatever their excuse was. They had a laundry list of them, right? And I was telling them, I said, look, here's the deal. If we have, in my eyes, I was thinking earthquake, right? If we have an earthquake and we can't get back to the classrooms for whatever, we can still do instruction via online. It's very, I mean, it's years and years of online education. And we can still give services to our students, which they're paying for, and to be able to graduate on time with enough contact hours. A lot of pushback on that. And then when COVID broke out, and they started going online, everybody was scrambling to put classes online. And I don't understand why we can't get people. And I think maybe it goes back all the way to the preparedness stuff, right? We fight for residents to be prepared for disasters. I don't know how we can have administrations be more prepared for these events because they're there. None of these should be secret, right? I mean, we've known about pandemic flu for at least 100 years. We've had people planning for it and stuff and I know I'm talking to the choir here, but I just needed to, say, I think a little bit, I disagree with you when no one says that we do lean forward. We do understand what's coming, but you're right in the sense that we didn't have enough evidence, science evidence here to say, hey, let's go forward with it. And then one last thing, I'll give it back to you. Taleb, right, in his book Anti-Fragile, talks about the fact that we always are looking for evidence before we make decisions. But by the time we have the evidence, it's too late to make the decision.
Right. No, and I think we're in agreement, and it goes back to this thing, I posted yesterday again I just posted our first situation report from the 27th of January in 2020. And the first question was, what was your trigger to activate? And I think that is the problem. I think in a lot of cases, a trigger is unachievable. I think there's a lot of people waiting for triggers that never get reached. And especially under blue sky, you can't conceive of every trigger. So you have to assess every situation on its merits right now. And so, and it goes back to what you said, Todd, you activate your plan. You say, this is our plan. We worked our plan. I'm turning on the plan. And you don't wait to get all of the evidence, and you don't get a consensus around that. You don't wait for a trigger. You just turn it on. And once you turn it on, you can always turn it off. But if it's not on and you need it, now you're behind the job. So it's not waiting for permission. It's not asking the boss. It's telling the boss, and the boss can always say no. The boss can say, we're not ready, let's turn it off. But then now it's on her or it's on him. It's their issue. So, but you've done your job. I was in a tabletop exercise many years ago with another former FEMA administrator, and he said, I don't remember what we were talking about, but he said, you are not paid to be an optimist. As an emergency manager, you are not paid to be an optimist. What he means by that is you are paid to be a pessimist. You're paid to think worst case. So think worst case and act worst case, and everybody else can turn it off. But if you think and act worst case, you have there's less likelihood you're going to get behind the job. You're going to get overwhelmed.
No, absolutely. I agree with that. It's funny that you're right. To be that they you know what they say about optimistic sailors, right? They'll end up drowning because their boat sinks, right? You have to be a pessimist when you go into the ocean, because if not, you're going to end up dying. So, Michael says, we mentioned in a prior discussion, I was challenged too many times for leaning too forward and activated too early. And yeah, I've had that problem too, where you pull the trigger early to activate, and people get all upset with you because you think you activated too early. And then,
you know what I say to that? I say, embrace it and talk to it and say, yes, I'm guilty of that. Yes, that's what you paid me for. Did I overreact? Yes, you pay me to overreact, because there's only two ways this thing's going to go. There's only two ways. There's not people, because everybody thinks there's a third way. What's the third way? The third way is that we get it right, that we activate right on time, and we are able to scale up on time, and we have all the stuff we need when we need it. Guess what? Can't happen. Is never going to happen. So you're either going to have too much, you're going to activate too early, you're going to throw too much at it, or it's going to go the other way where you're going to activate too late, you're going to have too little, you're not going to have enough. Those are your two choices. So you pay me to overreact. I'm going to overreact. I'm going to throw too much at it. And you can always turn it off. And someone says, well, you overreacted. You anticipate too much. And I say, guilty.
Right.
Guilty as charged. That's what, and if you want another emergency manager that doesn't do that, be my guest. And guess what? That's the one that's going to get caught short.
So Michelle asked the question. She says, is it because we never had to use these plans? And she goes on to says, with black swan events, they're too unrealistic for the average individual to accept. And I could agree with the idea, Michelle, about the unrealistic aspect of the black swan. There's a book, and I know Dan's out there, if you could put it in there, something like regarding like the limits of imagination or something like that. That's the only thing that keeps us from doing better. Dan, if you could put that book up, and that would be great. But the idea here is that, and Eileen kind of goes into this idea that we're paid to go into the deepest, darkest recesses of our brain and pull out the worst nightmares. And I think that those two things together is that when we do these drills, right, we do exercises, how many times have you been told, oh, take that out of the missile because it's so unrealistic, And we joke about the ICS 400 class where you're at the state fair, the senator's coming who's running for president, and the train derails and the floods happen at the same time. And people go, oh, none of those things are all going to happen at the same time. Well, folks, I think we're seeing like that happen all at the same time. But we have a COVID happening, a political elections going on, civil unrest across the nation, and all that happened all at the same time. Oh, plus in California you have fires, and on the East Coast you have tornadoes or hurricanes coming in where you have to evacuate entire cities, right? And when will that ever happen in a disaster? Well, it's happened, right? And so we have to think those worst case scenarios, and how do we lean forward on those? So
I want to stay on that a second because I think it's so important. And Todd, that's the reason that we get along so well, because we think alike. But I'm a paranoid person, right? I'm a catastrophist. I mean, my it's in my genes. My grandmother was that way. My mother was that way. And so I'm that way. So I'm a natural emergency manager. I'm paranoid. I'm a professional warrior. And as Eileen said, I have these worst case scenarios, these terrible scenarios in my mind. And my job is to take them out and to put others into that scenario, right? What's the job of the emergency manager? If they're not running a job, you need to be taking your planning teams and you need to be throwing them into those very difficult scenarios. And when they're like, oh, that wouldn't happen, and this is not realistic, and that's too much. There's we always have one phrase for that, and it's don't fight the game. Don't fight the game. That's my game. You want to have your game. You have your game. This is my game. So just play the game. That's what you're up against. What are you doing right now? And that's if you do that with your organizations enough, they start to understand it, and they stop fighting the game and they let themselves go. And I'll tell you, there's no better benefit to the organization than to throw these folks into these very richly detailed, challenging scenarios and have them talk about what they're doing right now. And that's the best thing you can do for them.
Absolutely. Kelly, you and I could talk about this all day long. We're here at the hard stop of the show, and we're gonna have to let you go. But let's schedule this again. And I promise you, next week I will have my Chiefs hat on, and I will be gladly.
I'm gonna be checking, man.
Absolutely. All right. Well, congratulations on the Chiefs for making it to the Super Bowl for 2 years in a row. May Mahomes have a great game for you, Kelly. For all those Tom Brady fans out there, whatever. Okay. And we'll just leave it at that. Hey, everybody, thank you so much for joining us today. And without you, I couldn't have such a great conversation. And please join us next week. Until then, stay safe, stay hydrated. Follow us on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, your favorite podcast player, and take care.